What's up, yo? Welcome to Your One Life. I'm your host, Kim Young Kim, and I'm super glad to have you as a listener today. If you're new here, here's what this podcast is all about. This podcast is about teaching you from the greatest minds in the world, assisting you in all aspects of your life, and reminding you that there's so much to be grateful for, such as Jake Paul and Andrew Tate getting whooped in the ring. Now, every joke that could be told about these two getting thrashed in the ring has been told. So I won't say anything else besides the fact that the universe has been made right, and we need to keep this trend of clowns getting their just desserts going in 2026. All right, so today's episode is spotlighting the best episodes and interviews of 2025. I'm grateful for all of the great guests and topics I got to cover this year, and I wish I could put so many more clips into this episode, but I had to pick and choose and kill some of my darlings, because otherwise this episode would be 3 hours long. Now, the way this works is I introduce each of the interviews or topics right before the clip, and of course the links to the full episodes are in the show notes. So without further ado, let's get in it. This clip is from my episode, How to Talk to Anyone, Anywhere, and it's about how to compliment people. Now, another thing I love to do is I love to compliment people. And I said this in the last episode, but I'm going to say it again. Compliment people if they deserve your compliments. If someone's very stylish, oftentimes I'll go up to them and I'll say, I am hiring you as my stylist. And people love that. It's also good to follow up with a question like, where do you shop? Because that helps move the conversation along. Now, both authors say when you compliment someone, like you say, hey, I like your shoes, you also need to follow it up with a question or another comment like, where did you get them, or something like that. Because what people oftentimes do is when you give them a compliment, many people, myself included, deflect the compliment, which doesn't create more conversation. So always have a follow-up comment or question to keep the conversation going and to stop them from saying, oh, these raggedy old things. That's not where you want the conversation to go. Also, when you compliment people, do not compliment their appearance, particularly their bodies. It is just weird and awkward. Don't do it with strangers. Maybe don't even do it with people you know unless you know them pretty well. It just creates a weird energy, and I'm not a fan, and most people I've come across also aren't. And honestly, the next time someone says to me, what do you do to stay in shape? I'm going to respond, Ozempic. And I'm not saying that this happens often, but when it happens, I just don't know how to respond. And it does not move the conversation into much of a conversation after that. Now, the one time you can compliment their body is when they're broadcasting it. For example, if they're wearing a shirt that says, I'm not perfect, but my pecs are, or Tyrannosaurus pecs, yeah, maybe at that point you can give them a compliment on their sweet pectorals, but you can also give them a compliment on their sweet t-shirt game. And when it comes to receiving compliments, don't return the same compliment towards others. I can't remember which author said this, but it feels forced and contrived, and it's not a good look. And I've done this myself when someone has come up to me and said, hey, that's a nice jacket. And I respond to them, thanks. I like your jacket too. And 9 times out of 10, they're not even wearing a jacket. And as you compliment people, make sure that you're specific about what it is you're complimenting them on, particularly when they're wearing something. Like, oh my gosh, your outfit makes you look like a Bond villain. Now, if you're worried about people not receiving your compliment, one thing you can do is when you're complimenting them, you can also compliment yourself to take the pressure off of them. I've done this myself when I noticed a woman just got her hair did, and I just went up to her and I said, your hair reminds me of my personality. It's flawless. Now, that was an exaggeration about her hair, but it made her feel good and it made her laugh. All right, so when it comes to compliments, both authors say, don't compliment people too much. That comes off as sycophantic, and that's not how you want to come off. So in order to make sure you don't do that, what you should do is you got to keep track of your compliments. You should mark down on a sheet of paper after each compliment you give them. And if they look at you and they ask you what you're doing, just tell them. People love honesty and they love learning about people skills. Now, this is something I like to do, and I think it's funny. It's not from any book, but it makes me laugh, so I do it. What I do is I like to make ridiculous comments on people's appearance. So if a man is like very handsome, I will go up to him and I'll say, "Hey, has anyone told you that you look like Dr. Phil?" And then I'll say, "No, I'm just kidding. You don't. You're a good looking fella." But it always makes people laugh when you make this joke, as long as they're really good looking and you tell them you're joking right after. They love it. Now, I do that with other men. I haven't done it with women so much because oftentimes they think you're hitting on them. But I'm going to start doing this just for funsies to see how it goes. So the next time I see a really beautiful woman, I'm going to go to her and say, "Hey, has anyone told you that you look like the devil?" And then I'll follow it up with, "You absolutely don't look like Satan at all. I was just curious if anyone ever told you that." I don't know how that's going to go, but I will report back when it goes down. And something tells me it's going to be a magical moment. All right. So when it comes to compliments, hit them with some follow up questions. Don't return the same compliment to people. Be specific about the compliments that you're giving and don't overdo it. Unless you're complimenting me, then definitely overdo it. This clip is from my episode with Bill Burnett, the co author of Designing Your Life, and it's about designing your life practices. Now, in this first section, Bill goes over all 6 of the mindsets of designing your life. And this may be a very different way of thinking than you're used to if you do not have a background in design, which is where they get a lot of their ideas from.
Yeah, and it's really the same mindsets. I teach a lot of designers how to design stuff, products, services, experiences. That was my main job for a long time. Designers think differently because if you're trying to invent something that's never been done before, you got to think creatively. So the first mindset is curiosity. Be curious about the future. Second mindset is reframing. Just pick, if you're stuck on a problem, change the problem, reframe it, turn it around, put it upside down. Then it's radical collaboration because the answer is in the world with people. You're not going to think it up on the couch. Go out and talk to people. Then it's bias action, which is just let's get going because what are we analyzing? Everybody wants to analyze everything. You got no data. It's the future. We're going to just go experience it. And then finally, mindful of process, which is just, hey, sometimes we're looking for lots of ideas, so we're diverging. Sometimes we're zooming in and we're going to prototype something. That means we're converging. So, don't get your brain going in 2 directions at the same time. We actually added another mindset. The 6th one is storytelling, because you got to be a good designer is a good storyteller because you're telling the story of a future with a new product or a new you in it. You got to be a good storyteller. And then that brings more people into your radical collaboration, which gets more curious, which gets the whole thing going.
All right. So those 6 mindsets were curiosity, reframing, radical collaboration, bias to action, being mindful of the process, and storytelling. And I'm glad they added storytelling because every time I tell people about that one time that I was mistaken for Fabio at Big Lots, everyone gets curious about me. They all want to collaborate with me and swab the inside of my cheek for a DNA sample. Okay, so in this next section, Bill breaks down what reframing is and why it's so important.
Wow, I'm teaching the class for my MBA, PhD, and master's students called Designing the Professional. A little bit of a tweak on the Designing Your Life class right now. This quarter at Stanford, we just did the reframing class or session. So the power tool in design or design thinking and in designing your life is everybody's trying to solve problems. So problem solving, lots of different techniques for problem solving. There's all these books on how to hack your brain or hack your way to success. That's all problem solving. But problem finding, like working on the right problem, is actually more important because there's a famous Biscuit professor who said there's nothing quite so foolish as doing something very, very well that never needed to be done in the first place. Peter Drucker. And it's like a lot of times when I'm advising companies or I'm advising people, they're stuck on a problem and it's the wrong problem. It's not really about getting promoted at work. It's just about having more influence. It's not really about owning a boat or a house or something. It's just about having some security. So if you can flip the problem around and typically you either abstract it by going up a level or you dive in and go down to what's the root problem. That's what we call reframing, picking a better problem, because problem finding is actually more powerful in the innovation process, innovating your life, than problem solving. I'm sure most of the people watching this or people who follow you, they're smart people. They got all sorts of problem solving techniques. They're just working on the wrong thing.
Now, you probably have worked on the wrong thing before. Maybe you spent a bunch of time making your house look spotless for your soon to be mother in law when she came to visit, and it turned out she was blind. And what you could have done is you could have saved a bunch of time by spraying something that smelled nice, and also probably listening to your partner when they talk about their family and other things that are important to them. Now, Bill goes on to talk about how to find the right problem to work on and how you know you have a good reframe.
So the reframing is like, all right, like I said, you got a problem. You're thinking about one way, you're thinking about a different way. And the test is, does that give you more options? Does that open up more options for things to try? Does that open more freedom? The goal of reframing is freedom. I'm not stuck on a problem anymore. Now I'm moving forward again. I used to be stuck and now I'm unstuck. So the goal is freedom. And the way you know you've got a juicy reframe is, hey, this is coming up with lots of things to try, lots of people to talk to, lots of little experiments, we call them prototypes, to run to see if this is the right direction. Sometimes a reframe, you do the reframe and you're still stuck. So it's like, okay, well, there's lots of ways to look at the problem. This one isn't any better than the one I'm stuck on. Let me try a different way to do it.
Yep, that's what it's all about. It's all about freedom and it's about more options. I read something really wise in a book one time that said, if I have an hour to solve a problem, I spend 55 minutes defining what my problem is and 5 minutes trying to solve it. Now, I did this recently, and it turns out that I'm the problem. And the solution is more cowbell. This clip is from my episode on the book 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman. And this clip is about making time for important things and setting boundaries. Now, once you figured out what you want to do, Burkeman takes from the teaching of an artist named Jessica Abel and says you need to treat your time in the same way you should be treating your money and pay yourself first by doing those important things before anything else. Prioritize important stuff like your art and carve out time every day to make sure it gets done. And this is why I start each day working on my tan, which, if you've ever seen me, you'd agree that my tan is a work of art. Now, when it comes to big projects and dreams like writing a book, Jessica Abel says, break tasks and big dreams into steps and smaller work periods and call them meetings that you're going to have with yourself. And you block off that time and nothing can distract you during that time and from that work. That's how you're going to get this stuff done. Another thing that Oliver says is don't take on more commitments that you can handle. He references the illustration from the professor who brought the rocks and the sand and the water into his classroom and how he fit all the big rocks in first and then the sand and then the water. And what Burkeman argues is that's not a realistic portrayal of life because there are too many rocks and some rocks just don't make it in. And this is much like Greg McKeown's argument to pick a few things to go big on and to say no to everything else. Now, he says with all things, what you need to do is you need to create boundaries. For example, the more efficient you are with emails, the more responses people are going to expect from you. And so what he says is you actually need to train people to be slow to respond to your email because oftentimes they'll figure out things that they're asking you on their own. And you have to set boundaries at work to make sure that you're not becoming this machine that helps everybody at the cost of your own work. And he also says you got to set boundaries with your time to set a quit time for each day. My personal quit time is 6 o'clock a.m. And when I'm headed to my car, my boss is like, where are you going? You just got here. And my response is, exactly. Now, as you set boundaries, you got to set boundaries with the amount of projects that you take on, no more than 3 projects at a time. Sometimes you only focus on 1 project at a time. And that's how you're going to get stuff done because, as it's been said, you can't boil the ocean. This clip is from my episode with Mac Pritchard, the host of Finding Your Dream Job, and it's about how to break into the hidden job market. I do want to talk more about the hidden job market. I think you've touched on it some because there's the referrals of the jobs. They don't always come out to the public, right? But, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
No, that's correct. There are many jobs out there that are never advertised, never posted publicly. No one knows exactly what the number or percentage of positions might be. We could talk about, there are ranges of up to 80%, as low as 20. Whatever the figure might be, you don't want to miss out on those jobs. And the good news is that through networking and relationships and connecting with others, you can not only find out about those positions, you can make yourself a candidate for them and get them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you recommend like hacking into servers as well to like kind of look at the email on the back end, or is that a tip that you?
No, you don't need to do that,
Okay.
and you shouldn't.
Okay, all right. I'm going to stop doing that starting today.
I think you're running with the word hack here, because here's the good news: if you go out and talk to people, these aren't national security secrets. These are positions that are filled through referrals and word of mouth, and you can put yourself into those networks. You don't have to be a coder and have to hack a server to find out about these positions. You can do it through conversations like this, but you have to be thoughtful and strategic and seeking out and running and managing those conversations.
Right. And so it's all about just tapping in, getting information on interviews, getting your finger on the pulse of what's going on, and maybe just glancing at someone's email when they're not looking, right? Just kind of,
I would advise that. But let me share a story that illustrates all this. So I'm in Portland, Oregon. I met someone who was living in Washington, D.C., and she came to Oregon because she was a trailing spouse. Her partner and husband got a job at Nike. And so she had never been to Oregon. She had a high-powered job on Capitol Hill. She was the deputy communications director for a U.S. senator. And she had a great network in Washington, D.C. She also had great networking skills. So she came to town around January, and we met. And I had her on my podcast because once a month we talk to people who have found a job they love. And she talked about her job search. And she came to a state where she didn't know anyone. She didn't really understand the market when she arrived. And she saw her challenge as really getting to, threefold. One, she wanted to introduce herself to people. She wanted to get the lay of the land and understand what opportunities might be available. And she wanted to understand what jobs might be available and what they might pay. So over the course of 6 months, Kim Young, she told me almost 100 conversations, but they were strategic conversations. She knew she wanted to work in a senior communications position for a large corporation or organization. And she eventually targeted utilities, and she ended up getting a great job as a senior communications director at Portland General Electric. And when I would tell people, well, here's somebody who spent 6 months to get a senior corporate position, and she did it through conversations with people in the field, they often will say, well, that sounds like a lot of work and how did she know of those people? Well, the work involved was really no different than sending out 100 applications.
Sure.
And I meet people who will tell me they've sent out not 100 applications in 6 months, but 2 or 3 or 400. And if you're doing your application properly, you're spending an hour or two putting it together because you got to tweak your resume and your cover letter. And often people who might send out 100 applications, they might get 3 or 4 interviews and eventually an offer. This person, she only interviewed for 3 jobs, but they were 3 jobs that she really wanted. And the position she got was unadvertised, and she got 3 offers. So the other thing that happened was she built a network of people that she could turn to and continue to stay connected with and also serve as she started her new career in a new state. That's the benefit of stepping away from the computer and going out and building connections and relationships and generating referrals. You not only hear about jobs that aren't posted, though you may find yourself competing for publicly advertised jobs, but you're going to have an advantage because you're tapping into the power of connections and referrals. And at the end of the process, when you do start your job, you're going to have a network that's going to continue to serve you for years to come.
This clip is from my episode with J.L. Collins, the godfather of the financial independence movement, and it's about investing during uncertain times. Why invest in such uncertain times? Why not just hold your money tightly in your fist, in your mattress, in your wallet? Why not?
Well, so first of all, let me start by saying it is always an uncertain time to invest, right? There is never going to be a perfect time to invest. There's a saying on Wall Street that the market climbs a wall of worry, right? And the market is also very volatile. And so every now and again, as I've already referenced, it's going to drop.
Sure.
I'm kind of amazed that tariffs haven't triggered that. I mean, as we're recording this, the market's at an all-time high. Kind of surprises me, but that just proves that the market doesn't do what you think it might do at any given point, which is why you just have to keep buying and holding. Because ultimately, even if something really bad happens, let's suppose when the tariffs are fully implemented, the market does react very negatively. Well, the market will move past that. So we're still in the middle of that. So it's kind of hard to really talk about it in a rational way. And people listening are inevitably going to be saying, well, this time is different and what have you. So let's roll back, and not just a couple of years, not too terribly long ago, to COVID.
Huh.
Right? So when COVID hit, and of course the market reacted negatively to this news, my social media lit up.
I was one of them. No, just kidding.
Well, okay. Well,
Kidding.
yeah, I didn't know that. But I mean, people were saying to me, JL, things like, JL, I get it. And I agree with the simple path. I mean, I think it's the right way to invest. I think it's a great way to build wealth over time. But this time, JL, is surely different. This time people are dying. This time entire countries are shutting down their economies.
Huh.
This time, surely things are different.
Right.
And my response to that was, well, yes and no. So the first thing you need to understand is everything that triggers a market crash, it's always going to be different. It's always going to be something big and scary because otherwise the market wouldn't crash.
Right.
And this just happens to be the most recent, this being COVID, just happens to be the most recent big scary thing that has triggered a market crash. By the way, that market crash dropped 33% and turned around within 6 weeks or something. It was just incredibly short-lived, but that's highly unusual. It's different in the sense that it's tragic. People are dying. It's different than we hadn't had a pandemic for 100 years. But it's the same process for the stock market. The stock market's going to be scared. It's going to plunge. It's going to come to terms with it. And then typically it'll slowly recover. Now, in the case of COVID, it recovered very sharply, but typically it slowly recovers over months or sometimes even years, and then goes on to adapt to it and to set new record highs. Even if something terrible comes out of the political situation, the tariffs, whatever, that's going to happen this time too. The only exception to that will be if it is something that is civilization ending.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, if there's a nuclear war, if Russia and the United States start throwing nukes at each other, well, that's probably game over. But it's not just game over for the stock market. It's game over for everything. So at that point, how you're invested won't make any difference. So one last historic thing, I'm actually old enough to remember the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that was 1963. I was 13 years old.
Right.
So I was old enough to be aware of it. And as best I understand, that's the closest, as far as we know, the closest we ever come to a nuclear war. And there was a lot of talk in the media about that possibility. And at one point, I was watching two guys talking about investing, and the one guy was saying, this really looks bad. I mean, this looks like there could actually be a nuclear war here, and I'm selling all my stocks. And the other guy said, well, you're right. It does look really bad. It looks like it's a nuclear war is a possible thing. But he said, I'm buying. And the reason I'm buying is if there's a nuclear war, it's not going to matter. Nothing's going to matter. If there's not a nuclear war, and of course there wasn't, the market's going to turn around and soar back up. And that's, of course, exactly what happened.
This clip is from my episode with breast cancer survivor and breast surgeon Deepa Halaharvi, and it's about things that you can do to prevent cancer. Okay, so in regards to whether you have had cancer before or whether you've never had cancer, what do you recommend people do? I mean, obviously, eat fruits and vegetables, don't smoke cigarettes. I learned through your podcast that alcohol is really bad for the most part.
Right. Yeah.
So we know we got to exercise. Besides the general good information, what really, I guess you get a lot of bang for your buck practicing good health habits.
I say 5 things for my patients, and this is for anyone, whether you've had cancer or you've not had cancer, it decreases the risk of recurrence. So obviously exercise. What type of exercise? Well, there is the aerobic exercise and there is the strength training. There is so much data that's now coming up, especially for women. And I'm pretty sure it's probably the same for men too, but especially for women in my field, we take these young women, put them in menopause because of cancer. We remove their ovaries. So at young 20, 30, 40-year-olds are becoming postmenopausal. That causes a lot of dysfunction in their body. So strength training, and we usually say muscle is an organ of longevity. Like you have to protect it and train it like your life depends on it, but it truly does. So strength training 2-3 times a week, lifting heavy weights, some sort of cardio, walking, running, things like that. Obviously, limiting alcohol, no more than 2 drinks per week is what I say. Now, having said that, I have a hard time completely eliminating alcohol because I love my social connections, my friends when we get together. So I'll have a glass of wine here and there. And then sleep is paramount and it's very important. And we're getting more and more data now about sleep, 7 to 8 hours of sleep. And also going out in the morning when the sun comes out, the circadian rhythm, it sets where you're able to fall asleep at night. No smoking, HPV, there is Cancer Atlas that looks at cancer globally. It's a 4th Cancer Atlas. American Cancer Society talks about that. And we have about 16 million cancers worldwide and 10 million deaths worldwide of cancer, different cancers. Mm-hmm. So 50% are modifiable risk factors, meaning things we can do to improve and change. And other 50% is non-modifiable risk factors. So it's your gender, your family history, your genetic makeup, all of those is non-modifiable. You cannot change that. But things you can change is 50%. So limiting alcohol consumption, not smoking, limiting UV exposure, and then also getting vaccination for HPV because that can cause head and neck cancers, then anal cancers and cervical cancers. And then, so I talked about exercise. I talked about obviously eating healthy. Exercise not only includes the aerobic, the strength training, but also mindfulness meditation is what I say. And then eating healthy, sleep 7 to 8 hours. When you're sleeping, your body, your neuroplasticity, and you're kind of eliminating all this junk in your brain, you're recycling. It helps you to retain information the next day, helps sort the memories, kind of synthesize your memories. Social connections, we are learning during COVID, the people who did not go out and have social connections. My mom is one of them, unfortunately. She became too comfortable being at home by herself and not being out with her friends. 25% risk of dying because you do not have good social interactions and connections. It's because of heart disease. It's a direct link to social isolation, to cardiac disease, 25% mortality or death rate. And then the other thing people can do is increase or just follow screening guidelines, mammograms. If you're average risk woman, you need a mammogram starting at age 40 every year. Do your monthly breast exams. Between 25 to 40 years old, they need to be seen by a clinician every 3 years. do the breast exams. I see a number of young women, 15% of the young women get diagnosed under age 40. And so they need to be able to do a breast exam once a month. And if they find any masses, lumps, enlarged lymph nodes, nipple discharge, they need to be seen by a doctor. Colon cancer. Age is now decreased to age 45, so people need to be following and getting colonoscopies and things like that. Weight loss, abdominal pain, bone pain, back pain, like we talked about, like screenings are so important. Making sure that you're seeing your clinician once a year is important. So, sorry, that's a long answer to your short question.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Let's see how much of that I can remember, actually. Let me do a little something with that. Well, you gotta come through and get exercise. You can lift a bunch of weights and arrive. I'm talking about sleep. You gotta just be deep. You gotta understand that it is how you rise. You could understand the diet is so good. And the alcohol is not something you should do. I'm talking about them screenings, something that I'm seeing. I need to see my doctor every 3 years. I'm sure I missed something there.
No, that's really great. Also we talk about cancer this month because of it being Breast Cancer Awareness Month, but the number one cause of death for women is heart disease. And so we still have to take care of our hearts. And it's not the breast cancer. Breast cancer, if you get diagnosed in early stages, there's good treatment, good prognosis, and good survival.
Yeah.
So, but going back to the strength training part, I'm very passionate about that because really the organs that it's helping is your brain. You release BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It helps your heart with decreasing blood pressure, vasodilation for the blood vessels. It helps with the bone, not getting osteoporosis as we get older. Cancer patients are very prone to that because of the medications we use to treat them. Also, it releases GLUT4 in the muscle, which actually pushes the glucose into the cells, so decreases insulin resistance. So there's a number of benefits from strength training. And we're finding out more and more as the time goes on.
So you're telling me to stop making fun of the meatheads at the gym?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to be one of them. So here we are.
I know. Same. Yeah. I go to workout. I go to the gym, sort of the CrossFitish workout because I'm trying to be one of them. But yeah.
No, that's wonderful. I did not know. I knew it was, you hear about things, but you're just like, all the stuff you just listed. I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to walk around with dumbbells everywhere now.
I know.
That's great.
I walk with a weighted vest. Hopefully, that's doing something good for me.
Yeah, most definitely. That's great.
Yeah.
This clip is from my episode on meditations by Marcus Aurelius, and it's about not worrying about things outside of your control. And as you think about things that you're worrying about, and he says, don't worry. And he says worrying is a waste of time. But as you do, ask yourself this question: does this matter? And if the answer is no, don't think about it, especially if you can't do anything about it. Speaking of which, lately I've been having to tune out almost everything, particularly with the news. I never watch the local news anyways, because it's mostly reporting on things that are terrible, like robbery, murder, another Pitbull concert coming to town. Seriously, who goes to these things anyways? So I ignore local news for the most part, but national news I've been paying attention to, and lately it's been making me very anxious. And that's what it's meant to do. It's meant to make you anxious and angry, and that's what keeps you watching it, right? So the other day I put all my devices away, and when I did, my day got better, my mood got better, my sleep got better, and my outlook did too. And as I say, tune all that stuff out. It's not about saying everything's fine. It's not about living under a rock, but it's about taking the Stoic advice of not worrying about things that are outside of our control. And he repeats this throughout his writings, that the only things we should focus on are what's in our control. You can't control what's happening in your city, in your country, and even in your neighborhood. And so because of that, I don't even look at what's happening in my neighborhood through my Ring security system app, because it's always my neighbors posting something like, oh, these porch pirates hit my house again, or were those gunshots or fireworks? Or who's that handsome Asian man who's always picking out trash? Which is kind of rude to me, because I would never call the women that I pick up trash. But real talk, not paying attention to what's happening in my neighborhood has made my life better. And he talks about how to make your own life better. He says, happiness is an inside job. And he says, you got to learn to be cheerful, quote, without requiring other people's help or serenity supplied by others, end quote. And that one hit me hard because the messaging we've been given is that happiness is out there somewhere or through other people, which your relationships are a big part of your life and what makes life meaningful, but they're not everything. And also what happens when you can't interact with people for one reason or another. If that's the case, are you going to experience loneliness, which is negative, or solitude, which is positive? Now, there's a story of a man who was a POW in the Vietnam War for 7 years, and for 4 of those years, he was in solitary confinement. And what he did is he actually tapped into Stoic philosophy so that he would survive. And that's what we got to do as well. We got to survive, we have to thrive, and we have to follow Stoic philosophy. And what Stoicism teaches is don't let your circumstances determine your happiness because your circumstances are outside of your control. I have to remember this every time I'm sitting in traffic or dealing with a crazy driver on the road, which is often. But yeah, that's going to make your mental health so much better when you just say, yep, traffic is a part of life. It's outside of my control. Yep, crazy drivers show up and they're also outside of our control. So anything that's outside of your control, don't worry about it. And this is a repeated message in Stoic philosophy and in this book. Focus on what's in your control, which reminds me of a quote by Naval Ravikant that goes, a rational person can find peace by cultivating indifference to things that are outside of their control. And what that basically means is you're going to be peaceful if you just say anything that's outside of my control, I don't care about and I'm not going to worry about, right? And that's what Marcus Aurelius says. And he also says, don't worry about things and for sure, do not catastrophize. And one thing I've learned in life is most of the suffering that we experience as people is over stuff that never happens. I mean, you know how many times I've worried about people finding out that I'm Banksy? That's all I worry about. Has it happened yet? No. Okay? So stop worrying, people. This clip is from my episode with financial guru Lynette Calfani-Cox, and it's about budgeting.
I think that in large part, the vast majority of us have not been taught this. And budgeting is a skill.
Right.
It is something that you can learn. And there are some, kind of practical do's and don'ts to help you to become a better budgeter. So the very first thing that I tell people, and this might sound extremely simplistic, but nobody does this. So the number one rule of budgeting, according to the Money Coach, is you cannot spend more than you earn.
Right.
Now, people might be like, well, duh, yeah, of course, Well, yeah, but again, most of you are. You're like, of course, that's obvious, but you're still doing it. So it does not matter your income level, whether you earn $30,000, $300,000, or $3 million a year. If you spend more than you earn, you'll always be broke and in debt. The math will never be mathing for you. It won't add up properly, okay? So you really do need to make sure that you've actually taken an account of your outflow and your inflow. So how much do you have going out the door? What are your true monthly expenses? Not a guesstimate, not a I think kind of thing, but you have to actually put down on pen and paper, black and white, or through an app or a tool, a software program, what is going out the door. And then you have to compare that against your net income and what is coming in the door. If you see that there is a shortage, for example, that, oh, wow, my bills each month are more than what my actual take-home pay is, we look at everything, you have to be willing to adjust. If you're not, no matter what you do, it will never work. All you're going to keep doing is borrowing over here, using credit cards to fill the gap, taking payday loans, borrowing from family members, doing a whole bunch of stuff. So you have to start there to just see, like, am I in alignment at any sort of level? And of course, if you're not, you adjust accordingly. You make a judgment call about what is a priority for you and what is not, the things that are not priority, you start to scale back and to shave some of those off of the budget. But then I'll tell you something else that's an extremely counterintuitive hack about becoming a better budgeter. And it's spend money on yourself.
Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa,
So,
whoa. Okay, please explain. Oh, goodness.
yes. So the vast majority of people who sit down and painstakingly try to go over their budgets, they have a whole bunch of I gottas in their budget. I got to pay the rent or the mortgage. I got to buy food. I got to put gas in my car. I got to pay the utilities. All of the things, and they don't have anything for themselves. So they may haphazardly do it. They may splurge. Like I said, they may have an impulse purchase. They may just on instincts, sometimes buy something for themselves, but they haven't systematically and strategically allotted money every single month for themselves. And the reason that this is so helpful is because of behavioral psychology. None of us wants to be deprived, right? So the reason people hate the B word so much is they feel like they're in a financial straitjacket. They're like, oh, you're going to put me on a budget. You're going to tell me all the things that I can't buy, I can't do, what I can't achieve, what I can't have. And I'm like, no, 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 no. On the contrary, I'm going to let you decide. I'm going to ask you what is important to you. What are your values? What do you prioritize? And then let's fund that. Let's set aside some money for that. So if you tell me, oh my God, I love photography, I'm going to say, oh, let's set aside some money. Do you need a new camera? Do you buy film every month? Do you take little classes on photography? What is the thing that you're spending money on that has to do with photography? And I'm going to say, let's build that into the budget. Then you don't have guilt spending. You don't go overboard. You're strategic. You still can make sure that your spending is in alignment with your actual income, all of the things. And you feel like, oh, I get to have some fun here. I get to enjoy. So you're able to stick to the budget because you're not suffering from frugal fatigue. This is a hack for actually sticking to your budget and staying on track with the budget month after month, year after year.
That's good. That's good. Spend on yourself. Can I put that on a bumper sticker too? Not yet. You probably
absolutely can.
Yeah.
Again, as long as you observe the number one rule, make sure that your expenses and what you're spending on is less than the income that you're bringing in. No value judgment on my part. Sometimes people go, Lynette, I'm a purse girl. Oh, I love my shoes. And I'm like, oh, okay. You know what I do when people tell me that? I was like, great. What kind of shoes do you like? And they're like, oh, they're not getting the judgment. I'm not wagging my finger. I'm not telling them that you shouldn't. If that's what you want, if that's your priority, if that's important to you, by all means, go ahead. Let's work into the budget, money for your handbags or your shoes or whatever. Some people want electronics. Some people want to golf. Some people want to travel, whatever it is. It's not up to us to judge people for what brings them pleasure or joy. But I will say this, in all my years of coaching and of just talking to people about their experiences and their values and what they want, et cetera, the frivolous stuff actually goes to the wayside very quickly after like 2 or 3 months. So if they said to me, yeah, I really love purses or bags or whatever, I would go, oh, great, let's work that into the budget. Then they'll sit up there and they'll go, oh, I bought a purse or 2 purses this month. I bought another purse next month. I bought another purse. Now they have 5 purses. And it's like the person who says, I need a LBD that for women. That's a little black dress.
Okay.
And then they're looking in the closet. They have like 4 little black dresses. And they're like, really? Do I need another little black dress? So after a while, behavior that is not in alignment with their own values and their own choices and their own priorities actually tends to go by the wayside because it brings clarity into focus for them. And they're like, why am I spending on this? And then they get closer to what's important for them. So again, it's not for us to judge people about what they choose to spend their money on. It's to help them to create a framework for spending that has some guardrails and that's safe for them in terms of not going into debt.
I like this advice and I don't like this advice because you told me not to judge people and that makes me very upset. This clip is from my episode on the social dilemma, and it's about the psychological manipulation that social media companies use. And the danger is they have all sorts of insight into your psyche. They know when you're lonely, they know when you're sad, and they know how to get you to come back onto their platform. Facebook literally has a term to get users who haven't logged into the platform in a while to come back on, which is called resurrection, which is the most ironic term considering you're probably sitting in a meadow, listening to birds chirp, sipping on chamomile tea, and enjoying your life. And then they get you back on where the opposite of life is. And once they get you resurrected, they can pump products your way. Now, I've always told my students, the house always wins. And the only way to beat the house is to stay out of the house. That's why you shouldn't step foot into a casino or get into credit card debt. Now, social media is also the house. And as you already know, they even use the same tactics as slot machines to keep you hooked. And the problem is, you now have a slot machine in your pocket. And the reason why the house always wins, by the way, is that they hire Ivy League PhDs in psychology, the smartest people in the world, and pay them stupid amounts of money to manipulate our minds and to keep us hooked. Now, I remember years ago, I was talking to one of my former students who was a 16-year-old girl at the time, and I asked her if she knew what she wanted to do as a career. And her response to me was that she wanted to own a weed dispensary, which is a hilariously naive answer because she had no idea how unglamorous that work is. But beyond that, she had no idea who she would be up against if she were to try to start a dispensary. That's like being an NFL fan, stuffing your face with nachos on your couch and saying, hey, I want to go try out for the Eagles. It's not like she's going to be competing with a bunch of other stoners who had the same idea. Who she would be competing with is some of the smartest people and the biggest companies in the world, and she wouldn't stand a chance. And much like my former student, neither do we, because the house always wins. And the house wins because the platforms are engineered to keep us addicted just like drugs do. It was mentioned in the documentary that every day they're getting better at hooking us in. Day by day, the power of the algorithm increases, but we're not increasing in our ability to fight it. So every time you log on, you should picture Zucks with a big old smile on his face, handing you your own butt on a silver platter. And the truth is, we get addicted because they make it addicting. Here's a great quote to drive that idea home. The problem isn't that the people lack willpower, it's that there are 1,000 people on the other side of the screen whose job it is to break down the self-regulation that you have. That's by Adam Alter. This next clip is from my episode with Pete Davis, the co-creator of Join or Die, a documentary on the importance of joining things, and it's about how you should join a club.
So, my advice would be the question we've been telling people, my sister and I have been telling people along this journey is we've been saying, ask yourself the question, what are you doing alone that you could be doing together? We say in the film, it's not about eating your broccoli. It's about doing what you love together.
Yep.
So if you are raising a kid alone or just in you and your partner just raising a kid, go join a parents group. If you are running alone, there are running groups. If you're playing alone, there are playing groups. If you're fighting City Hall alone because you're mad about something in your city, there are advocacy groups. If you're trying to better your neighborhood alone, there are neighborhood groups. There's even a group in San Francisco we heard about that's called Sunday TV, where you're watching TV alone. You can watch TV together. So there are so many clubs out there. And you just got to try them out. You're not going to like every restaurant, but it's good we have restaurants and you're eventually going to find one you like. Yeah. And you have to give it a shot. You know exactly what's going to happen tonight if you stay home. The way that your life has adventure is if you go out and see what happens. The reason I'm so confident in this is because as we've gone on this tour, we're about to hit 500 community screenings of this film. And if you want to host a community screening, you can go to joinordiefilm.com and click host a screening. We have people that just write to us and they say, I joined a club because of this. And none of them say, I joined a club and I regret it.
Right.
They always say, I joined a club and it changed my life. That doesn't mean there aren't bad clubs out there. That doesn't mean people haven't had bad experiences with clubs. That doesn't mean there are poorly designed meetings and poorly designed clubs. But the vast majority of people who put themselves out there to join a club and even to start a club. Find the median experiences. It's a total adventure that transformed my life and led me to join other clubs and meet other people and have all these other things happen in my life.
Oh, that's fantastic. All right. Let me do something with that. That's a whole PSA. All right. You need to understand what you do alone is something that you could gather and have some time with some people who have the interests that you enjoy, and you could screen this movie in your city and maybe just start a group and then maybe start two, and that's how you coming through with my dude Pete. All right.
One of the wonderful things we found out in the tour is there is a huge history of choruses. There were town choirs,
Sure.
town choruses. It used to be a huge part of civic life. There were choirs inside of other clubs that we found out about.
Mm.
There would be a union that had a choir, or a party had a choir, and it would be a huge part of civic life. And actually, in Putnam's Italy study, the thing that eventually turned him on to looking into civic culture was choral society. So I thought you'd especially appreciate that as a singer.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I've actually looked for choirs to join. Maybe I need to return that stone because that is super interesting. I'm going to look more into that. This next clip is from my interview with Craig Arthur von Schroeder at the Lamborghini Urus activation event, where I was sponsored by Lamborghini of Atlanta. Craig, I need more. Hit me with one more important thing that the people need to hear to make their lives better, because you got 3 careers under your belt and a thriving business.
Call your parents.
Oh, okay.
I learned this during COVID. I'm 47 years old now, and growing up, I was the kid who never called their parents unless I had something good to say, and I was always striving as an entrepreneur, as an attorney. I'd only call them when something good was happening, and when you're in the hustle, it's few and far between. But during COVID, I realized that your parents, they don't really care about necessarily only your successes. They just want to know that you're okay. So since COVID started for maybe the past 4 years now, I've called my parents every morning at 8 a.m. and it's changed their lives.
Oh my gosh.
They tell me that every morning. And,
Oh my God.
And knock on wood, they are both healthy. They're in their late 70s, but I can tell when I talk to them, and it's even just, hey mom, I got 3 minutes. Have a great day. I love you. Bye. That's all they care about. I don't have children, but I know that it's changed my parents' lives. And I have a lot of friends who didn't even talk to their parents. I think it's a sin. And, call your parents is my unsolicited advice on living.
That's so good. All right. Very cool, man. Well, that is a positive note, and one we have not heard. I don't think I've heard that on my podcast ever. So thank you for sharing that. That is fantastic. All right, Craig, I'm going to wrap this up and then we'll call it a day. All right. Yo, you're here up on a mission. I'm talking about how you got to listen. You got to open up both ears and just understand what their freaking needs are, what their freaking desires. And that's what I'm saying. You got to be inspired. You got to have a whole bunch of passion. That's what I'm saying. Are you asking yourself what lifts you up on the inside? And that's what I'm saying. You got to just grow. Basically, Craig just dropped it. I'm just talking about right here. I'm talking about things that you got to do, like pick up the phone and call up your home. I'm talking about the one that you grew up in, and that's what I'm saying. Don't do that. That's a sin, and that's what I'm saying. And that's how you begin your morning all the time, and that's what I find. 8 a.m., I check up on them, and that's what I do. I come through and send love to mom and dad, and that's how I go. Craig right there, up in the flow. All right, so that's the episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned a lot from those clips. 2025 has been a blast making this podcast. And like I said, I'm grateful for all of it, the learnings, the guests, and of course, you, the listener. If you're new here, don't forget to hit the follow button so you don't miss future episodes. And if you got a lot out of this episode, please share it with someone that needs to hear these important messages. And of course, I'd appreciate it if you shared it on social media. All right, so that's all I got for now. I will catch y'all in January. For those of you who celebrate, I hope you have a great holiday season, a happy new year, and that you start dreaming big and really start having a vision for 2026. This is Your One Life. I'm Kim Young Kim. Hope you have a great day, a great week, a great new year. And until next time, peace.